بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. This session and probably the next session, inshallah, will be the final sessions where we discuss obstacles to living with heartfulness. Then we hope to, inshallah, move into a conversation around what it means to be heartful, to live with heartfulness, and then methods of developing heartfulness in one's life. The topic, inshallah, for tonight and likely next week is inauthenticity. And the reason why this is so important to talk about is because it often runs in the background without anybody noticing. And it interferes in our functioning without us even realizing. And so we're going to first start by trying to flesh it out and spell it out, inshallah. I think most people would agree that inauthenticity is a major problem. And in fact, I'm going to make the argument next week that inauthenticity is a major obstacle to living with heartfulness. But I think we might have a lot of different ideas. And based on our conversation just now, I think we do have a lot of different notions of what constitutes authenticity. So I want to start with a definition provided by a Canadian sociologist / philosopher, Charles Taylor. He says, and he means by authenticity, he says, I mean the understanding of life that each one of us has his or her own way of realizing our humanity, and that it is important to find and live out one's own, as opposed to surrendering to conformity with a model imposed on us from outside by society or the previous generation or religious or political authority. So there's a few different points in that definition. Number one, he says that authenticity, according to this definition, is this understanding that every one of us, we have our own way of making our personal lives a reality, how we want to live it, that we have the ability to shape our own way of being in the world, and that it's important to do so. It's important to do so. That if you fail to do so, there are consequences. We'll talk about it. And this is a pushback against the idea that a person should conform to the ideas around them, to the models, the thoughts, the beliefs that people around them have, resisting that idea, resisting those ideas and thoughts, but rather choosing one's own way of being in the world. And so, how many of you, when you hear that definition, go, yeah, that does seem to capture how a lot of people today view authenticity? Show of hands, how many of you feel that's how people view it? That's how the term is used. And Taylor is a phenomenal researcher on this topic. Taylor researched secularism in quite a bit of detail. And so in the process, he investigated the concept of authenticity as a real ethical ideal for the modern self. Now, let's explore a few different ideas of what it means to be authentic. And some of these will overlap with Taylor, what he said. The first might just be exactly what Taylor meant. But some have called it inner sense authenticity. So, according to this definition and this idea of authenticity, being authentic means aligning with a deep inner you. And this is how you hear even the idea promoted. It's like, discover your true self. Y'all ever heard something along those lines? Discover your true self. Self-help books all the time. This book will help you escape the shackles of perfectionism and discover your true self. So, according to that, if you think about it, the understanding is there's this true self, and it's your job to discover it, to figure out what that true self is. It's already there. It's already there. And the idea is that there are so many forces that have you shackled, that have you stuck. And if you can escape them all, you'll get to your true self. You'll be in alignment with this deep inner you. One of the main avenues a person is expected to adopt in discovering this true self is introspection. It's to reflect, as you mentioned. And so this is the default, I think, understanding in self-help and mainstream discourse. The idea is look inward, listen to your inner voice, follow it, and strip away any social influence that might have corrupted your inner voice. So, Will Storr, in one of his books, he writes, he goes, this ideal self, you know, this self that you need to connect with deep within you for you to be authentic? He calls it an ideal self, meaning the current self you have is not ideal. It's people pleasing. It is too it's too conformist. It's not authentic. The ideal self, however, is authentic. That's the notion. He says this ideal self enjoys thinking it's in some way unique. Right? That I'm just like everybody else today, but if I could get in touch with my true self, I would truly be different and unique from everybody. This ideal self thinks it's trying to make the world a better place. And so it highly values personal authenticity or being real. It'll preach that in order to find happiness and success, you must be true to yourself and follow your dreams. Right? I mean, how many Disney movies have this theme underlying the main character's journey? Is it not? Listen to your inner voice. Break out of the shackles of what your people and your mom and dad and what, your country, what they've always taught you. Go out there. Be authentic. That's the notion, right? So we don't actually see inauthenticity in our culture, I would argue, as merely an obstacle to well-being. No, we see it as a moral failure. If someone's not authentic, we look down. One of the greatest insults, I think, is to be called fake. You're so fake. The way that hurts, it's like, right? Call me stupid, but don't call me fake. Because, again, authenticity, being authentic, is such an ideal. So we have this image of what this ideal and authentic self is. I'll mention 3 of them. 1, the idea that this ideal self is uncorrupted by society. It's uncorrupted. School teaches you to think within the box. So we need to shake off the impact of school, which limited and restricted us. Go back to being that original authentic self that was creative. Right? It's been corrupted by my culture and my upbringing and all these different things. Number 2, there is this implicit understanding that this inner self, this authentic self, it's unchanging. It's like a stable, permanent core around which everything else is temporarily, warping and moving. What's the sign of that? Evidence for that is when people say, that's just who I am. Right? I can't change it. This is who I am. Why do you have to be so blunt? I'm just being real. That's who I am. As though it's not possible to change that, right? That's the hidden, implicit claim is this is who I am. I'm a blunt person. Take it or leave it. You don't like me. Move on. This is who I am. And so it's almost like it's understood to be permanent. And then the other understanding we have is if I could just connect with this inner self, this authentic self, it'll heal so many of my problems. I will not be depressed anymore. I won't be anxious. I won't suffer from a whole host of different problems. But if we adopt this understanding, we can run into some major problems, right? So if we operationalize this way of thinking about being authentic in the world, you might start to see some major character flaws. So here's the first question we have to ask. Let's say someone adopts this idea. Yes, I need to connect with that inner self. Listen to that inner voice. How do you identify what's actually you? How do you know? So you have an intrusive thought. Is that you? Is that the authentic you? You're standing there after a long hike on the edge. You're looking over. An intrusive thought. Should you listen to... No, it's a real question. What do you make of that thought that arises? Yeah. The first thought is not mine. The second one is. Why is that? Because the first one is unhinged. Right. So this is interesting. You're right. Most people would say, that's not me. That intrusive thought that arose. Remember, unprompted. It's not like anybody around you suggested it. There's no external influence. That thought came from within. Yet we disown it. We say, that's not me. That's not me. That's not my authentic self. Okay. What about a raw impulse? A raw impulse. So someone, I think you were talking about this earlier, right? When someone pushes you and you have this moment of anger that flashes through you, turn your eyes and you look at them and you want to maybe even hit them. That impulse that came from within, is that you? Right. Right. So you're going to argue that it is your authentic self, but you went into a problem there, which is if you subscribe to the idea that connecting with your inner authentic self is an ideal, it would mean that to connect to this impulse and act upon it to be authentic would be good, which is a problem, right? I'm trying to highlight some of the paradoxes you run into when you start to identify everything that comes from within to be your authentic self. There's going to be things that we reject and say, no. These are not actually my authentic self. Interesting. It means from within, then, some parts are not authentic, even though they come from within. Who determines what is the authentic self and what's not? It sounds, based on our conversation, we're just being very convenient in selecting what's authentic. Basically, whatever paints me in a good light, oh, that's me. That's authentic me. And if it paints me to be someone who's deranged or, rash and has anger management problems, then that's not me. So we have 2 points here. Based on what comes from within and what that inner voice pushes us to, we evaluate it and we kind of sift through it, whether it's acceptable or unacceptable. And then we also acknowledge we have the agency to act upon it or not. That's an important thing to acknowledge because this will refute the notion that the inner self, that authentic self, is just the way we are. No. Your poor behavior cannot be defended by, that's just how I am. No. Because you know that not everything that comes from within is acceptable. You know this. You acknowledge you even have the ability to hold it back should you reject it. If you don't like what the idea that comes up, the thought that comes up, you're going to repel it. You're going to stuff it down because you rejected it, which means you have the choice. Even in this current behavior, you could reject it and you could choose to not act upon it. You're not doomed to be this person just because you're trying to be authentic. Does that make sense? This is that inner sense authenticity, where authenticity is defined by like how you feel within, and what you believe to lie at your core. And all you need to do is just discover it. Later, theorists had an issue with the inner sense authenticity. So they came up with a different theory. And this was, there's no inherent inner core self. That's not a thing. They argued it's more a productionist authenticity. Your authenticity is defined and kind of composed through your action, your practice, and your commitment. You are what you do. You are how you project yourself out into the world. That's who you are. That's your authentic self. So Nietzsche, for example, he said, treat your life as a work of art. Experiment with different ways of living. Find what aligns with your inner kind of inclination. And then try to align everything upon try to find some alignment between all the different forces within you. And when they finally align, regardless of what they align with, that's who you are. And sometimes we adopt this in some capacity. We go through different careers and jobs looking for what? My true calling. Right? As though I'm going to land on this one that will just align with who I am. I'll be fulfilled. And, that'll be the real me. If I do something else and every day I hate it, that's not actually me. I'm not being authentic to myself. Does that make sense? Yeah. But there's no discipline needed in this one. Because the moment you don't like something, it doesn't come easy to you. Find what comes easy to you, because that's your authentic self. The idea is you don't unearth a pre-made self. You become someone by what you repeatedly do and what you feel aligns within you. But we have a few issues here with this idea as well. So we can be deeply mistaken about who we think we are. We can be deeply mistaken. We can be convinced that we are this type of person. I'm a this person. And for years we run with that narrative. I'm an extrovert. Because we're forcing ourselves to behave like extroverts, because we acknowledge that an extroverted personality is often celebrated. It's often, what's the word I'm looking for? Rewarded. What Susan Cain calls the extroverted ideal. All right, introverts are overlooked. Their opinions aren't heard because they don't speak up all the time. Right? They'd rather wait for someone to call upon them. So, if my authentic self is determined by who I claim I am, and then I try to live it out, what if I'm deeply mistaken? And people discover this. You ever seen someone choose, like literally shape everything around a certain decision because they believe this is who they want it to be, and they got to a certain point in life where they couldn't deny it anymore, they couldn't lie anymore, and they go, if I'm honest, I only did all of this to make my parents happy. And the whole time they thought they were being authentic. Yeah, no, me, I love to become a doctor. I love it. Right? Hmm? As being generous. Right. But imagine, right? Someone goes the whole process believing that's who they are until one day they're like, why am I so miserable? Something's not aligned here. And they discover, they acknowledge and admit it for the first time. I've been doing this whole time just to make my parents happy. Yet up till then, I mean, it took discipline, no doubt, but they're miserable because they're not acknowledging and admitting deep down what's actually there. They were mistaken. Yeah, any of y'all seen someone like that? Just deeply, almost in denial about what they actually want until they couldn't deny it anymore. It just glared them in the face. Another thing we can do, and this is a difficult one, guys. Are you guys ready for it? We can self-script images of ourselves which actually clash with our patterns of behavior. So imagine someone who says, I'm not a confrontational person. Meanwhile, they have a whole, if you check their sent folder, the amount of long emails where they are confronting people is insane. No, I'm serious. You know what I'm talking about? You ever met someone who's like, I'm a really kind person? And if you were to ask everyone in the room, is that person kind? They'd be like, oh, dude, we haven't seen that person smile. No, I'm serious. I've met people like this, where in their heads, they've convinced themselves that they are this type of person. So they've come up with their own identity. We find an identity and we identify with it. We construct this image of who we think we are. So we think, what? This is who I am and I'm being authentic. It's like there's no alignment at all. Your lifestyle does not reflect that to the least. Yeah. Yeah, but that would still result in them trying to like carry it out. Some people kind of go around with this notion, I'm a nice person. I'm a kind person. But there's no push to actually behave kindly. Because for them, this is who I am. How everything I do is kind. But it's self-scripted. And you can lie to yourself. And so, someone who comes late all the time, and you talk to them and they go, no, I'm just spontaneous, right? Like I just go with the flow. No, you're late. That script does not work. No, I'm just like I'm a chill person, right? Like I'm not rigid like you, yo. Always will gotta be there 7 a.m. Right? Like no, I'm flexible. No, you're late. But the image and the script you have is justifying your behavior. The person thinks they're actually living up to this ideal. No, it's not. Yeah. Astrology science? Dude, if they're born in June, they're born in June, yo. Like, what are you gonna do about that? Yeah, they got a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? It's like, well, I was told I need to be this, so I need to be this, otherwise. Right. Because it's tough, right? Admitting that the whole thing's bakwas. Like, how many hours do we waste talking about this, and how am I supposed to make sense of my own behavior at this point, right? Um, one's what? Hmm. That's a real argument. Um, the Buddhists don't view there to be any permanent self. It's constant flux. You're constantly changing. So there's no permanent sense of self, really. Later on, David Hume had the same view. He said, there's no you. There's just your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings. They're constantly interacting. They're coming together to contribute to a sense of self, but it's not a stable, permanent self. So these are the notions I think we have. But I'm gonna come to a different idea of it eventually. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. That's actually the third point here is we often come up with that script influenced by others' perceptions. So one could be like zodiac signs, right? Is someone tells you you're something, right? For young children, oh, you're so good at math. And in their heads, oh, I'm good at math. Now I have to be good at math, right? And if they ever struggle, it's like, oh no, no, I need to uphold this consistent image that I am good at math. And the amount of pressure people will put on themselves to uphold that image that someone else, that narrative that someone else fed them. Um, and so yeah, but to reflect on what are the narratives that others have fed me, but also what have I put out into the world, and how does that align with how people view me? In my head, I think I present myself this way. How is it received? And so, like you said, asking people from time to time is a very scary thing, but it can be extremely rewarding. Or sometimes in passing, someone will just say, you're playing a game. Who's the most generous person, right? And like your name doesn't come up, and you're like, what do you mean, right? And you discover, oh wait, nobody sees me as generous. And then you think back and go, yeah, I haven't given charity in a while. But because in your head you were a generous person, you never thought about evaluating whether it's true. Um, and so if we, yeah, go ahead. Interesting. You're mentioning how affirmations, like I'm kind, I'm rich, serve the purpose not of changing the person's actual state, but because they want to believe they are, through affirmations, they change that belief. And once they have that narrative, then they'll feel better. Very interesting. Very interesting. Now, I want to highlight a few other concerns here. When we view the self, this authentic self, as this pristine core that we need to access and remove all the layers of socialization and its harmful effects on me, removing all of that and get to that pristine core, we risk some major issues here. That we've talked about a few, but I want to talk about a few more. One of them, and this might be the most prevalent, and I'm glad some of you flagged the point. Because if you don't flag the critical point we're going to talk about, you end up with a pretty harmful um, understanding of authenticity. We might blur and conflate our feelings and desires with our values. Meaning what? If I feel something is right and correct, then authenticity would demand that my feeling itself is a justification for its validity. I feel this is right, which means for me to be authentic, I must act in accordance with it because it feels right. And the understanding is if I don't act in accordance with this feeling and this desire, I'm being inauthentic. There's a difference between feeling and desire and values. It's a really critical distinction. I'm going to make the argument later on, inshallah, probably next week, that aligning with values is one way, a healthy way to conceptualize authenticity, right? But aligning with feelings and desires, not necessarily. Go ahead. No, no, no. But it can't. That's one thing to remember. Values, any decision made in alignment with values, you will never regret them. You may feel some negative consequence or something might happen. It might not be the most ideal outcome, but you'll sleep at night knowing you lived in alignment with your values. And you could do something that feels amazing in the moment and gives you this dopamine high. But if it lacks alignment with values, down the road you will not just feel bad, you might experience deep shame. Yeah. What is a value? Beautiful question. We'll talk about that inshallah. But it brings us to the question of truth. Truth and values. We're going to talk about inshallah. But for now, I want to highlight this point. We cannot conflate the two. A temporary feeling, and we have to be honest about this, because truth, every Muslim, every human being really seeks truth. They might not make it a priority in life, but deep down, truth must guide the way we go through life. And it is truth that will guide us to what is truly valuable, what contains value. What contains value is not determined by what I like. That's a very subjective and relative concept of what's valuable. Well, I like it, so it's valuable. No, but what gives it its value? Just the fact that it makes me feel good, that's not good enough. Because what makes you feel good could be totally misaligned with the truth. So truth has a deep relationship to values, and your desires and feelings could totally contradict both. And that's where we have to be careful. You can have a person in a situation where they have a deep lust for someone. It's a feeling. It's an inner drive, an urge. That's not their value. If that's haram, that is not their value. Authenticity does not demand you go and act on the urge. No. In fact, if you go and do that, down the line when you reflect on it, you will regret. I did not live in alignment with my value. I believed it to be haram. I believed it to be wrong, deep down. But the urge was so powerful, and for some reason in my head I thought, gotta do what you gotta do, right? Follow your heart. Not your heart. You're not following your heart. You're following your lust. That's not the mind, right? That's a person with their mind in the wrong place, totally. And so they chase after it. That's not authenticity at all. But again, if the core is the source of authenticity, when something comes from that core, it must be authentic. My desire and lust and urge must be authentic. And to act against that would be to be inauthentic, be fake. Does that make sense? And so people sometimes misinterpret. They see suppressing one's desires to be like, you're being fake. You actually want it, so why are you being fake? You're not some good person who doesn't want this haram. No, you're not. Your righteousness is not determined by whether or not you are inclined to haram. It's not. Even saints will be inclined to haram. They have a nafs. Absolutely. But the ability to hold it back, restrain it, that is authenticity. Because if a person believes that restraining it is the right thing to do, and aligns with what they believe to be true, it's a value for them then. But in that moment, they might mistake their desire for value and behave in a way that's very harmful. Yeah. Absolutely, we're getting there. Absolutely. I'm glad you asked, because no, 100%, you've highlighted a major issue with it. Up until now, our whole conversation around authenticity has been self-referential. Authenticity has always come back to myself. The standard of being true is me. If it comes back to what I want, but from an Islamic framework, what you want is not always in alignment with the truth. So you can't hold yourself as the standard of authenticity. But the problem is that we're still talking within this framework of authenticity equals non-conformity. No, I'm not going to let some religious framework stop me and tell me it's not good for me. Not my parents telling me. I gotta be real. Can't be fake. Act like, oh yeah, I'm not going to do that haram. But meanwhile, my heart yearns for it. Oh. So to give you some answer, the Islamic notion is more accurately described as sincerity. In Arabic, the word is sidq. This also involves alignment, but it's not alignment with oneself. It's alignment with the truth sent down by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's how Muslims have always viewed this idea of being aligned, being authentic. And I think you mashallah talked about it from the very beginning. Is who am I actually? Not who I want to believe I am or who I just happen to be deep inside. No, I am who God created me to be, who He created me as, and who He created me to become. Then I'm being authentic because now I'm living in alignment with the truth. That's a whole different idea than how it's used today. When a person believes that this core part of them is authentic, then we'll hide behind being real and honest. We won't take accountability. If this is who I am, I can't change it. So that's a you problem. Oh, you don't like when I say that? Well, go find some other friends. But it limits growth. And we're taught in the Islamic tradition the importance of good character. Good character almost always, at some level, involves resisting your immediate impulse. Especially when you're untrained and undisciplined as a Muslim, your immediate impulse tends to be like, swear at them. Right? Someone cuts you off, cuss them out, say this, do that. Right? Tell them really closely. And so, good character involves restraining that. As the scholars talked about, is it possible to change one's nature? Can you change it? Can you change your disposition? If immediately you find yourself to be very anger prone, can you change it? And their argument was absolutely 100% you can. Otherwise, why would Allah command you to do something that you have no ability to change? Because it would just mean it. You are what you are. How can Allah expect you to not be angry and not act upon your anger? So, inshallah, we're going to talk a little bit more about a more Islamic framework of what it means to be authentic. And then from that lens, if we fail to be authentic in that lens, then it will pose a major problem for us in living with heartfulness. So inshallah next week we'll talk about that. All right? Jazakumullahu khairan to all of you for your engagement and for sharing your thoughts, your ideas. I think it was really beautiful that everyone was kind of sharing the different thoughts they had and the ideas and different angles, and it came together really nice, alhamdulillah. So again, jazakumullah khair to you all for that, and we'll see you next week inshallah. All right, jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.